Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Global Compliance Panel's live webinar on new EU Pharmacovigilance Directive and Regulations. My name is Michael, and I'll be your host for today's session. And on behalf of the Global Compliance Panel team, I'd like to thank you all for participating in today's event. Today's webinar is being presented by Mr. Robert J. Russell. Before we start off today's session, a few words about Bob. For the past 9 years, Bob's been the president of RJR Consulting Incorporated, and the company RJR Consulting assists the pharmaceutical, medical device, and biotech industries in understanding and complying with international regulations affecting compliance, new product development, manufacturing, and quality assurance. And it has offices in Columbus, Ohio, Washington, D.C., in Brussels in Belgium, and with exclusive affiliates across Asia and Latin America. And Bob's also had about 28 years of past industry experience as CMC specialist, R&D director, and global director of regulatory affairs for Marion Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals and Cordis Dow Medical Devices. He also has a bachelor's and a master's degree in chemistry. We are honored to have Bob with us today to host today's webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start off today's session, I just want to quickly outline today's program. This webinar is for a 90-minute duration. First, Bob will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that he would cover, and then share with you his presentation. And would like to inform all our attendees today that once part of today's teleconference, you've been placed on mute and would remain so until the Q&A begins, which is towards the end of the webinar. But if you do have any questions during the session, please post your questions in the Q&A panel or in the chat messenger as well. And if you come up with questions after the session at any time as well, you can get in touch with Bob directly, or you can send your questions over to us. And ladies and gentlemen, also would like to inform you all that if you, for any reason, get logged out of today's session, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we're all ready, I request Bob to take it from here. Bob?
Thank you, Michael. Let me get the screen fully set up. We'll be good to go. Again, welcome. Welcome to our webinar today on the relatively new EU pharmacovigilance modules, the change in the directive as well as the regulation requiring various manufacturers as well as applicants to report pharmacovigilance activities in the EU. This first slide is just a copy of my contact points from the standpoint of my email, phone, cell phone, and a brief resume that Michael just went ahead and covered as well. Our company is headquartered just outside of Columbus, Ohio. We are a global regulatory consulting firm, really covering all the areas of North America, Europe, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and also the Middle East. We assist clients in the regulatory space, everything from initiating clinical studies or even getting your licenses inside countries, through clinicals, through licenses and registrations, as well as everything through the life cycle of variations, amendments, and product renewals. We also cover, assist companies in the area of supply chain, pharmacovigilance, and everything else associated to dealing with issues management with the healthcare authorities of the specific countries. Our course agenda today is going to begin first with an overview of the European Union, the regulatory structure of the EU, the various bodies and who reports to who and what their obligations are. Then we're going to be discussing, obviously, pharmacovigilance, Europe's definition of it, who they believe should be involved with it, the legal framework around the directive and regulation applying to EU PV rules. So as you know, they've recently updated these rules, put a lot more in writing than what they had before, and it isn't so much that everything is brand new. They've just reduced it to basically a module by module expanded understanding of the responsibilities of a license holder across the EU. We're going to be discussing the new reg and directive. We'll be talking about how the legislation is really geared to help protect Europe's patient population. We'll be talking about EDRs and reporting and the overall user vigilance database for reporting adverse events. We'll be discussing changes to labeling and then a relatively new committee that's been formed called the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee in their role in writing and updating the new modules. Then what you see here is really a whole set of new modules and annexes that we're going to kind of cover at a very, very high level, so we have time to do today. And I'll be going through which ones of these are in effect, which ones have come out, which ones are yet to be published, and the relative timing for those to be published, and just how the whole intended system is expected to work across the European Union. So let's begin with the overview of the EU and the regulatory structure. So as we talk about the European Union and the member states, and the member state is a country of the European Union, there currently are 27 member states comprising the EU. They've got those listed here. Basically, you'll see many of the original 15 European countries that you're used to seeing as European member states. But then beginning with Cyprus on the list, you'll see many of the Eastern European ex-Soviet bloc countries, plus Cyprus and Malta, who have joined the EU, comprising the new set of 27 member states. Also, you've got other EU applicants which are on the list to be approved to go into the EU. Croatia has just recently been approved to join the European Union. Iceland, Turkey, and Macedonia are also have applications into the European system for membership. You've also had and still have what's known as a European Free Trade Association countries. Sometimes they're listed as EFTA countries. They are currently Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. These countries, while they're not official voting members of the EU, abide by all of the directives and regulations written for the life sciences industry. So for all intents and purposes, they can be treated as if they were an existing member state. Now the structure across Europe is as follows. On top of the is the European Commission. They are located in Brussels, Belgium, where our office is at. Their responsibilities are to write and uphold the various laws across the EU, including healthcare laws for life sciences. So they are the authors of all of the directives that you see, all of the regulations that you see written across the EU. And of course, they must get buy-in from the individual countries, the member states, and their representatives in the process before something can be issued as a new law, either in the form of a directive or a regulation. And I should explain the difference between the two because it's quite important. They try to start writing most laws as regulations. The reason so is if something gets issued as a regulation, it is to be implemented across all member states equally, with nothing being subtracted from it, but more importantly, nothing being added to it. And what happens in the process in the real world is many countries and many country memberships disagree with a one common approach. They like what they've done in their country because they're used to doing it that way. So they basically, the process falls apart, and they eventually agree upon a set of minimum requirements that all countries must abide by. This set of minimum requirements, when that document is published, it's called a directive, which is why you have a medicines directive, you have a medical device set of directives today. But what that happens when a directive is issued is it allows every country to write national legislation around that directive to how they're going to comply with that directive. And it basically becomes a set of minimum requirements for the country, where a country can add additional requirements on top of a directive. So when you see a directive numbered, a directive written, the first thing you've got to do is look up that directive for a particular country that you're interested in to see if they've written legislation around that directive. And if they have, those requirements are also something you must abide by for the law for that particular country in addition to the directive. If the country hasn't written specific national legislation against the directive, then abiding by the directive is all you have to do for that particular country's law. Underneath the European Commission, you see the EMA, European Medicines Agency. They were formerly known as EMEA, but now they're EMA. They are the highest regulatory agency dealing with life sciences across the EU. They're located in London. Then on the right-hand side, you see the NCAs, the National Competent Authorities. These are the highest agency within each member state of the European Union. So if the U.S. was a member state of the European Union, the FDA would be considered a national competent authority. So that's the structure there. So the individual countries each have notified bodies working for them, basically for device registrations and ISO certifications, inspectors doing GCP inspections, GMP inspections, GLP inspections, and of course they've got national ethics committees, or at least most of them do, to review basically clinical trial applications before the competent authority will sign off on that clinical trial application in the country. But over on the left-hand side, really coming off of the EMA box, you've got two committees, the Mutual Recognition Facilitating Group, really licensing products via mutual recognition, and the Committee on Human Medicinal Products, basically licensing products across Europe as one license for all member states. But you have to comply, you have to be able to be accepted into that process, meaning that either A, you're a biologic, you're an orphan drug, or you're a brand new API kind of being introduced into the EU for the first time. These are the avenues by how you could be accepted into a centralized license granted by EMA. And of course, there's committee chairs known as rapporteurs in that process to facilitate a large committee. So, pharmacovigilance, the new directive and the regulations and how it's going to be affecting the EU, the European Clinical Trial Directive, and other activities. First of all, the definition according to Europe of pharmacovigilance, it comes from a combination of Greek and Latin words as the science and activities relating to the detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse events or other drug-related problems and issues. Their aims are to enhance patient care and patient safety and to support public health programs by providing reliable, balanced information for the effective assessment of the risk-benefit profile of new medications. And basically, pharmacovigilance comprises a really ongoing review, series of reports after a product has been through clinical studies and has been approved for being put onto the marketplace. And of course, for the collecting and managing of data for products which are licensed, so post-marketing responsibilities for adverse drug reactions or serious adverse reactions, and for evaluating that data that's being collected for signals, indications, a changing of the safety profile from what it was thought to be when much less use in a clinical study was being evaluated of the drug. Obviously, after a product's been on the marketplace for 5 years, which is the first renewal licensing period in the EU, the safety profile is much more robust, much more enhanced, not only on a numbers standpoint, but a range of adverse events which may have been either suspected or confirmed of the product which has been licensed and on the marketplace. Evaluating that data and making decisions with regards to the safety issue then becomes the responsibilities of the individual national competent authorities in Europe's overall vigilance system, taking action to protect public health. This also includes regulatory action of products, because in Europe, the profile is different. Obviously, when you get a license with FDA, the products on the marketplace, there really is no true renewal period of the drug or biologic. In Europe, it is renewed every 5 years. And even that's changing to some degree, where some member states have now passed a single renewal after 5 years, and the product is more evergreen, like in the United States, with no renewal period. So they're trying to push more towards a U.S. System, but still today many of the countries have the 5-year renewal periods for products. Of course, communicating with all stakeholders is seen to be of utmost importance, including the availability of safety data on products, auditing, really to be the outcome of actions taken, and of the key processes involved, at the various applicants' centers. And of course, Europe uses the periodic safety update report system, where safety updates are given every 6 months for the first 2 years, and annually after that during the licensing period, to really represent the best safety profile and ongoing evaluation of that safety profile of a new drug or biologic. So those directly involved with pharmacovigilance, obviously the patients, the clinicians, the regulatory authorities, both EMA and the member state national competent authorities, and of course the manufacturers, the importers, and those distributing products. So what you've got is the legal framework for pharmacovigilance in the EU was provided by a couple of things. First of all, a centralized regulation, which was number 726, basically first published in 2004 and was then updated again in 2010. And then a national authorized directive that was also updated in 2010. And the new directive and the regulations are to replace Volume 9A of the Pharmacovigilance for Medicinal Products Use in the EU. And the first set of Good Pharmacovigilance Practice modules were released in February 2012. These are the modules we're going to be reviewing again at a high level a little bit later. And the last set are a little late coming out. They were supposed to be out early 2013, even as early as second quarter 2013, and now they've been pushed back to more of a Q3 2013. So we're fairly close. There was just one more module released, I believe, the end of June, early July. So they're getting there, and we'll be covering the dates on those and which ones are still yet to be published. So the currently released modules, you will see here, there's a few gaps in those, but if you kind of run down the numbers chronologically, you'll see there's the basic framework. The first really 10 modules have been issued now, talking about the overall system, the system master file, PV inspections and audits, risk management, reporting requirements, an update on the PSUR system, post-authorization of post-marketing safety studies, where member state requirements for the transmission of information on non-interventional systems are also listed, and signal management, additional monitoring, and the last module, actually the next to last module, module 15, safety communication, has also been published. So again, against the currently released ones, you've also got some annexes that will apply. And the annexes talk about definitions. They give templates of documentation, such as the cover page of a periodic safety update report and what that new format is looking like. They give other guidance where developed under previous legal framework, but now under GVP overall. There's an annex around ICH guidance. There's an annex around abbreviations to be utilized. And the modules that are currently up for public consultation, because the system in Europe is as follows. That a module comes out, or a law or regulation comes out, then they open it up for dialogue amongst the stakeholders. And these will go through anything between 1 to multiple revisions, likely before they become adopted and put into effect. And the 2 modules that are open now for public comment is the one on management and reporting of adverse reactions and one on risk minimization measures, the selection of tools and effectiveness indicators. There are a couple of modules also now expected to be released anytime, since we're now technically into the 3rd quarter of 2013. One discussing public participation, another one dealing with continuous PV, an ongoing risk-benefit evaluation, and also public communications about licensed products involved with that. And modules 14 around international cooperation. So you'll see there's no 13 on the list because they basically have taken it off the development list because they're now expecting those topics to be included in module 12, the continuous PV development. So as I mentioned, all of them are going to be released and are subject to change should the European Medicines Agency see fit to do so based upon comments and the comments periods of the ones which are still being evaluated and haven't come to closure yet. And like I mentioned, we should be seeing the first draft of these soon, and the open period for comments against those drafts will then initiate from that point in time. So some of the things relative to that, the overall legislation update, the belief here is that it will strengthen the overall legislation and system for pharmacovigilance and rationalizes that the current system for monitoring the safety of medicinal products in the EU will now improve patient safety and public health, better prevent, detect, and assess adverse reactions, will allow patients to report adverse drug reactions directly to the national competent authorities. And it actually broadened the definition of adverse drug reactions to cover errors relative to medications as well as overdose on those particular products as well. So the new legislation, the expectation here is that it's going to better provide a clear role and the responsibilities for everyone involved in the overall system. The member states, the agencies, the marketing authorization holders, the licensees essentially, and the European Medicines Agency. And that there will be a user vigilance database, basically the development of a EU-wide medicines safety portal, which would allow much more transparent information to be open to the public. It will also allow the public, the patient database, to be able to file adverse reactions, adverse events, as they see it into the system. The feeling is that this new structure will strengthen overall companies' pharmacovigilance systems because it does require some additional items of a pharmacovigilance master file, periodic safety report with really nothing new, but the formatting has changed somewhat. The ongoing risk management, the risk-benefit profile, and the plans for products as this profile gets developed with more experience of it on the marketplace. And, of course, mandatory post-marketing safety studies, which we'll talk more about. The other new item here is it forms a new committee called the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee as part of the overall changes to the PV system in the EU. And we'll talk about the committee makeup in just a little bit. So the thought process here is that it will better protect patients by setting out clearer tasks and responsibilities, and also will improve the decision-making procedures and use resources more efficiently in this overall area of PV than what was being utilized earlier. The thought is also that it will help manage risk proactively by avoiding unnecessary administrative burden on all the stakeholders, particularly the licensees. And that it will provide a stronger link between safety assessments of products and regulatory action that may need to be taken either by the license holder or by the country, the member state, the agency in which the license is on the market and active today. The feeling also is that it is really geared to involve stakeholders into a more robust pharmacovigilance system, including allowing direct patient reporting of suspected, keyword suspected, adverse drug reactions. The true belief here is that it will be a portal so it will help keep the public better informed on medications. It will help strengthen communications and transparencies on medicinal safety between companies, but also between countries across the EU. That it also will, as I mentioned, strengthen companies' pharmacovigilance systems overall because of the reporting requirements that will be necessary to be pulled together to comply to the European system. And that it will ensure proactive and proportionate collection of high-quality data in doing so. So how is the legislation really going to affect the licensees, the marketing authorization holders as they're known in Europe? Well, the first thing is that the holders will now be required to maintain a pharmacovigilance system master file. And this will become part of the licensee's PV system to ensure that the monitoring and the supervision of all authorized medicinal products is being done. That master file is to be made available for any inspection by a competent authority or EMA. And the master file is not needed in full for a marketing authorization application by itself, but a brief description is required as well as the location of it upon approval of that particular license that has been applied for. So again, this is a master file that will be developed with experience of the product on the marketplace. So until you get your license, you don't have that experience. So it's the chicken and egg issue here. But the table of contents, how that's coming together, the location of it, and how it's going to be repopulated is the expectation of the description in the dossier package. That master file also should be regularly audited by the marketing authorization holder as part of their now internal auditing system of themselves. So this will be one more item you now need to add to your internal audit team's checklist for whether you have that auditing done by a third party outside the company. Marketing authorization holders also will be required to include pharmacovigilance measures for each individual product in the context of a risk management system. And this system shall be proportionate to the identified risks and potential risks of the product and the conditions given within the license. The holders must inform the member state and EMA before or at the same time as making a public safety announcement relative to a specific product as well. The holders also will be required to perform periodic safety update reports for newly authorized medicinal products, and except for those which will not need an ongoing PSUR, which are going to be generics because the products basically are equivalent to those very much known and familiar to being on the market with much medical history to them. A product containing an active substance for which there is a well-established medicinal use and the experience here has been demonstrated. Homeopathic products and traditional used herbal medicinal products as well. The competent authority can request a PSUR for the above products when questions arise on the PV data or if there's a lack of available safety data on any one of these products. So while the blanket provisions here is that you don't need one, there can always be the exception to the rule where the competent authority of the member state will still require the PSUR report be completed. PSURs will have a single assessment and procedures will be established to set the single frequency and submission date for all products containing the same active substance or combination of active substances, APIs. The frequency with which the PSURs are to be submitted is to be specified in the marketing authorization that you receive. And the reports are to be on a risk-benefit basis rather than individual case reports. And so they've changed the structure and the intent of PSURs from the normal data management to PSUR type reporting to the authorization holder's assessment of the risk-benefit profile based upon the data, based upon the individual case reports which have been filed for that particular period of the PSUR. So in essence, they're putting the onus of decision-making back onto the licensee or the write-up of that PSUR on a risk-benefit basis. Did that balance change? Did that profile change? Did it remain the same, etc.? The MA holders will be required to conduct post-authorization safety and efficacy studies as well, and these are going to be pass or pay studies if there are concerns about the risk of an authorized medicinal product. If that concern applies to more than one medicinal product, the Risk Assessment Committee will request that the MAHs conduct a joint study. So this can be done by collaboration by more than one licensee as well. The adverse drug reaction reporting on the EU database, there are some new definitions for adverse drug reaction, and it's much more broad than what it was before, because it now includes the requirement to report medication errors, overdoses, and the illegal use of a specific medicinal product. And the second major category here that's also new is patients will now also be allowed to report ADRs into the European database. All ADR reports will need to be reported into the Vigilance database. The marketing authorization holders and the member states will do this reporting to suspected serious ADRs within 15 days of gaining knowledge of the event. All non-serious ADRs have 90-day reporting timeframes. The holders themselves will no longer need to provide separate reports to the competent authorities and member states, but should enter everything regarding the ADRs into the Vigilance European database. The European Medicines Agency will then screen the literature on medicinal products and active substances, APIs, and will also monitor and make available the information on side effects on vigilance. There's also going to be some changes to labeling as part of the PV changes and new PV modules. Some authorized products require additional monitoring. Products with the new active substances, so brand new APIs for the first time. Biological products as well, including biosimilars, and specific medications that are subject to the obligation to conduct a pass in the EU system. Medicinal products that will require additional monitoring will be identified by the statement, the following statement. This will be saying something to the effect that this medicinal product is subject to additional monitoring. It will be followed by a black symbol. The symbol is yet to be determined as to how that's going to look. There are thoughts that it will be similar to the one the UK uses, which is a black triangle. But there is a site on EMA's site, Europa, given here, where more information and the updating more information around this can be tapped into. A standardized text which will be required for all medicinal products, asking patients to communicate any suspected adverse reactions to their doctor, pharmacist, healthcare professional, or directly into the vigilance database. So this is how the patients will be kind of notified that there is now a new system for them to report suspected adverse drug reactions directly into that database. I mentioned earlier the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee. They were put together, now responsible for recommendations going to the Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use, the CHMP, and the coordination group for any questions relating to pharmacovigilance activities for the medicinal products for human use, and also for risk management systems, and shall be responsible for monitoring the effectiveness of these systems. So the CHMP is a very, very broad representation group. It's 2 medical doctors from every member state. So essentially a committee of 54, actually if you add on the other 4 countries, there's 8 more, so it's 62 members, medical doctors, which comprise the CHMP. And so it's a very, very broad sweeping group of representative clinicians representing their country and their views on a series of items, including new licenses going into the centralized procedure. The committee formed is going to be involved in risk management systems, PSURs, the vigilance database, the medicinal subjects for additional monitoring, signal detection, urgent safety procedures which may prove to be necessary to implement across the EU, the post-authorization safety studies, the PASSs that I mentioned, and for literature monitoring for adverse drug reactions, specifically for new medications, as well as safety announcements. So the committee being formed had 2 elements coming together. So the new Risk Assessment Committee now is a group that's appointed by the European Commission, as you see here, for member representation across the EU, and that is going to be healthcare professionals, representatives from patient organizations, and also 6 additional members from a wide, broad area of expertise. But every country, every member state is also appointing a member and an alternate from their country to sit on the Risk Assessment Committee in the EU. So again, a very, very fairly large but also diverse committee. So a member state may delegate its tasks to another member state as well. So each member state may only represent one other member state. So one country can say, I'd like to delegate my task to the UK, and they'll be representing their own country, plus they'll be representing the UK and the other country that gave them the ability to do so. Members and alternative members for the Risk Assessment Committee will be appointed based upon their relevant experience in pharmacovigilance and risk assessments of all products intended for human use. The members and alternates will be appointed for 3-year terms, which can be renewed and be longer. And the chair will be reelected also for a 3-year term, but can be reelected as well. So the mandate of the committee is that they are being asked to cover all aspects of risk management, including the detection, the assessment, minimization of risk, and communication of it as it relates to the risk of adverse reactions and specific to individual therapeutic effects of medicinal products. Also, their mandate is to review the design and evaluation of post-authorization studies, to oversee pharmacovigilance audits as well. And the group has already been formed and has been meeting. Their first meeting was July 2012, so a year ago. They've been up and now operating. So as of speaking of the regulations and the directives as such, the new Pharmacovigilance Directive and regulations basically have no major impact on the Clinical Trial Directive, which it was in effect since 2004, May 2004 to be exact. But it really calls for that EU CTD to be rewritten and updated as well, since it hasn't really been touched. I mean, it was written in 2001, implemented in 2004, so it's now going on to its 9th year since it was really updated. And companies typically have 18 months from the release of new legislation before they draw the line in the sand and they say, okay, here's the effective date. You now have to be compliant to the new law. So Directive 2012-84-EU, the new Pharmacovigilance Directive, was entered into force on December 20th, 2011. And companies then needed to comply by July 21st, 2012. The corresponding EU regulation, again, EU-wide, system-wide, number 1235, is to be entered into force July the 2nd of last year. So it was also ongoing now for a little over a year across the EU. So now the guidance and the guidelines on good pharmacovigilance practices. And this is the guidance documents are really written in the form of a series of modules to be able to help applicants, marketing authorization holders know what to do from a practical standpoint to comply with a given aspect of the new GVP directive and regulations. But one of the things to recognize in Europe is that the directives and regulations are the laws. And guidelines or guidance documents, as they're known, in this case modules as they're known, are not the laws themselves. They refer back to the laws, and they provide applicants and license holders with more detailed information about what to do, how to comply. In and of itself, they are not the law. So you've got to go back to the language in the directive, in the regulation, if you're questioning something, debating something, challenging something as to whether you're compliant or not compliant with the intent of the law across the EU. So Module 1, discussion about the overall pharmacovigilance system and the quality system supporting it. So Module 1 provides the guidance on the establishment, the maintenance of an overall PV system for marketing authorization holders, competent authorities, and the European Medicines Agency, known as the agency. So it is basically the guidance document and the fact that there's going to be the expectation that a PV system is established that is going to facilitate these stakeholders working together to better assess the safety of products which are put onto the market across the EU. Module 2 begins to discuss the pharmacovigilance master file that I talked about a little bit earlier. So Module 2 is covering this master file system, and again, important to note that it is a legal requirement for marketing authorization holders to maintain and make available the master file upon request. And it has to be accessible either at the site in the EU where the main PV activities take place from that holder, from that licensee, where they're performed, or where the quality person of PV reporting operates out of. One of those two locations is where they expect to see the master file existing. There's nothing saying that there can't be more than one copy of this master file. If you, as a license holder, feel it's beneficial and should be kept, obviously electronic systems are best because then it's seamless as to where it is. But if you're keeping a paper copy, there's no reason why there can't be more than one, as long as it's being covered in these expectations. It's also a requirement of the marketing authorization holder. Summary information about that master file is submitted to the competent authority of the member state where the license is being held. So, for example, if you're going to be doing a centralized license, the expectation is the summary information about the master file is to be reported to the EMA along with the rest of the information in the CTD modules of the dossier. If you're filing products via the mutual recognition pathway, then every country that is either a reference member state or a concerned member state, remember the RMS is the first country to approve under mutual recognition, the CMS is concerned member state, so the additional countries are asking to recognize the first approval. So every one of them, as you add additional countries to a mutual recognized license, are required to also receive the summary information about the master file. Module 3, dealing with PV inspections. Of course, it's now saying that the guidance on these for the planning, the conduct, reporting, and the follow-up of PV inspections are to become part of a license holder's normal internal auditing process. Inspections are to be carried out by inspectors appointed by the national competent authorities and are allowed to inspect the premises, all records, all documents, and of course the newly added system master file at the company level. The objectives of the inspection are to determine that the marketing authorization holder has personnel, systems, facilities in place to meet their PV obligations, to identify, record, and address noncompliance that may pose a risk to public health, but to use the inspection results as a basis for enforcement action. against the license holder if it's deemed to be necessary. Module 4, dealing with the PV audits. So this module contains direct guidance on planning and conducting audits. It promotes the simplification of the audit process through a harmonized structure, basically encouraging consistency for conducting a pharmacovigilance audit. And the module is then in line with the following international organizations that you see here, which have all been previously engaged in pharmacovigilance activities and pharmacovigilance reporting. It also is covering the general policy framework and organization structure to conduct a PV audit. So it's a fairly important module to help you be able to describe what you should be ready for, how you should be setting up for an audit, the breadth of that audit, the content, the detailed line items of that audit, and will then become part of your overall operations auditing plan. Module 5, dealing with risk management systems. It was first recognized that products, upon their authorization, have very, very limited safety information to them, basically just the results of clinical studies. And some of the restrictions that have been placed upon that closely monitored population. Also, that a medicinal product is authorized up on a risk-benefit judgment profile in the trial population, and then not all risks in these populations have yet been identified. They just sheerly are not that, they don't have the sheer numbers within trials, phase 3s, to fully flush out all the risks and really develop a robust profile, which is the whole intent for developing the risk management system as more data is known and a more profile information is known about the safety and safety benefit profile of an already authorized product. The risks are really, traditionally found after licensing, after authorization, and so I think everybody in the industry really acknowledges that, which is why the PSUR reports have historically become so important during the renewal period of a product, particularly its first 5 years in the marketplace. And the planning of necessary activities can improve a product if it's more closely monitored and specific issues are identified both in the pre-authorization phase and the data existing coming out of clinical studies, but also, as we've talked about here, post-marketing data as well. So the purpose of risk identification in Module 5 is to allow for risk minimization or mitigation to occur wherever it's possible. And the really feeling here is that risk management has 3 different stages to it, and they're all interrelated, interconnected. First of all, you're trying to characterize the safety profile of the product, including what's known about it and what's not known about it. You're trying to plan the PV activities to categorize the risks and identify new risks as the increase of knowledge just from the sheer use of the drug becomes available through a more robust safety profile of the product. And that you're planning and implementing risk minimization and mitigation, and assessing these activities against the effectiveness of the product. So again, efficacy versus safety, risk versus benefit, and how that risk-benefit profile of the product may change over time from initial licensing to even its first 5-year, say 3 to 5 year information period of the product being in the market. The chapter dealing with this Volume 9A was based solely on managing risk. The new module is based on understanding risks in the context of the benefits of the drug that that's giving to that patient population. Obviously, even as you get into some of the rare diseases out there or orphan drug type things, the risks go up very high in some of those. But patients are in such dire straits. There may be no other therapy, a therapeutic pathway for a patient. So again, the risk-benefit profile is all relative against the indication, against the individual safety aspects of the product. The expectation here is that risk management is a global activity, but due to differences amongst different parts of the world and their healthcare systems and target populations, risk minimization tends to be tailored to specific regions, because this is one of the many different benefits that you will have in looking at different regions here as well. The EU is now moving much more to a modular structure here, as you've seen through the construct now of all these modules in place as of last year, transitional arrangements available, and risk management being applicable to products at any time in their life cycle. In Module 5, as we talked about here, we'll focus on both pre- and post-authorizations and all products, regardless of what procedure is being utilized to gain authorization, mutual recognition or centralized pathways. Module 6, dealing with the management and reporting of adverse events on medicinal products. And so, again, it's a response to a medicinal product that is unattended and noxious. It can occur as a reaction to a product despite using the correct dosage, or it could occur where it's used outside the correct dosage, such as an overdose, a misuse, an abuse, or medication errors, which now all become reportables under the new system. Also, there can occur just from occupational exposure to a product as well. It covers the legal requirements applicable to the competent authorities, the licensees, the European Medicines Agency, and covers all following information about human use products. First of all, the collection of suspected adverse reactions, the data management of SARS, the reporting of SARS, and the recommendations for the reporting of these under special circumstances that are also discussed in detail in this particular module. Module 7 deals directly with the periodic safety update reports. And the PSURs, again, are PV documents intended to provide an evaluation of the risk-benefit balance on the product for submission to the member states and to EMEA by the marketing authorization holder. They're to be submitted to the agency within certain time frames of the data lock point. As I said, traditionally, they're every 6 months for the first 2 years of the product being on the marketplace, and annually for the next 3 years, comprising the first 5 years of marketing of a new drug. With the new legal requirements for the electronic submission of SARS to the Vigilance database, the detailed listing, again, should not be included routinely. The PSURs should now focus on summary information. So again, in place of individual patient reports, these should now be summary information discussing scientific safety assessments and the integration of an evaluation of risk-benefit on the drug. Continually updating these with more data requirements, but not just the true reporting of the data of what PSURs used to be before. Now they're going to be expecting you to do the analyses of the safety profile of that drug, basically supporting the risk-benefit and supporting the basis for the product to maintain its license in the European Union. They're to be linked to the risk management plan. The new rules aim to minimize duplication and improve efficiency during the preparation and review of PSURs, other regulatory documents connected to it. The new legislation, as I mentioned, also waives the obligation to submit PSURs routinely for, again, that set of products I mentioned very, very briefly at the beginning. But if requested by a particular agency, you will have to still write one up. And this will be known to you upon giving you a license for the product, whether it's a generic license, a homeopathic, a traditional medicine product, and one which also has some safety history of product on the marketplace. So they will let you know as a marketing authorization holder what your post-marketing responsibilities will be in the PSUR area as they grant you the license. Also, as I mentioned here, these are the expectations. The Module 7 also is to increase the shared use of resources between the competent authorities. A single assessment of PSURs being performed in the EU for different products containing the same active substance, the same API, or a combination of APIs where the product has been authorized in more than one country, more than one member state. And the PSURs shall be made available to the following committees via PSUR repository. So again, the assessment committee, the CHMP, the equivalent committee for device review, as well as the European Commission. Module 8 on post-authorization safety studies or passes. That study is one which relates to an authorized product conducted with the aim of identifying, categorizing, and quantifying safety hazard. It will also be expected to confirm the safety profile of the product and to measure the effectiveness of the risk management measures taken against a specific product as well. A pass can be done by marketing authorization holder. It can be voluntary, or it can be an obligation as a condition of the license being granted to them. A pass can be a clinical trial, or it can be a non-interventional study, meaning not a true clinical trial, but an evaluation of safety data from patients taking the medication in a licensed form, but not truly involved or enrolled in a clinical trial, if certain requirements and provisions are followed. So there's some flexibility in this particular area. Again, the general guidance and requirements here to conduct a non-interventional pass will be for protocol oversight, reporting, transparency of results of a non-interventional study, the protocol and results transparency of one, and also to describe the procedure where the competent authority can require a marketing authorization holder, a licensee, to conduct an interventional or non-interventional study. Module 9 deals with signal management. And a definition of a signal is information that will arise from one or more sources that suggest a new potentially causal association, a new aspect of a known association between an intervention and an event or a set of events that is judged to be a sufficient likelihood to justify verification action. on the particular product. In fact, that the event was caused by the actual product, the actual drug or biologic. Again, signal management is being defined in addition a set of activities performed to determine if there are new risks or if risks have changed associated with the API or the finished product. Being determined through the examination of individual case safety reports, aggregated data from active surveillance studies, literature, or other data sources. The signal management process is expected to cover all steps, including validation, confirmation, analysis, prioritization, assessment to recommending action, tracking of what steps are being taken, and the recommendations which have been made as well. So while the user vigilance database will be a major source of PV information, signal management covers signals that occur outside of the user vigilance database. So only signals related to adverse reactions will be considered for the user vigilance database straight away. The main stakeholders in signal management are patients, the clinicians, the license holders, the authorities, various scientific committees being involved with the process at the EU level from the standpoint of being called in to be basically consultancy committees, and the actual competent authorities themselves, as well as the European Commission. And of course, this module will cover general guidance requirements on the structure and processes involved in signal management, how those structures are applied in the EU PV regulatory network or rules in order to determine if there are new risks being identified at this point in time, or if the risks have significantly changed. Module 10, dealing with additional monitoring. It explains, expected to explain that all medicinal products that require additional monitoring are identified by the symbol that we talked about earlier, this inverted black triangle. And the triangle allows for quick identification by health professionals and patients. That the triangle should be accompanied by a standardized statement in the summary of product characteristics and in the product leaflet, the product insert. Module 10 is divided into two sections, basically the principles for assigning additional monitoring status to medicinal products and the communication of these and the transparency of these, and the operation of the EU regarding the criteria of additional monitoring and communications and the impact of PV activities. Skipping all the way up to Module 15, remember we have a block of those yet that are not issued, will be coming out hopefully yet sometime in the third quarter of 2013, is Module 15 on safety communications. It's expected to provide guidance on to the license holders, the authorities, the EMA, for additional information found throughout some other modules where where communications is mentioned in those other modules. But the safety communication module focuses on communications of new or emerging safety information, the principles and means of safety communication, guidance on the coordination and dissemination of safety communication across the EU, and providing guidance for direct health professionals communications, what's are now known as DHPCs. Now, in addition to the guidances, there are some annexes which are also attached. Annex 1 basically covers over 45 definitions that you will find within the new PV module. So basically it's a one-stop library, a dictionary, to allow you to see how Europe is defining certain terms that they are utilizing maybe for the first time, or they have changed their interpretation or definition on since the pre-directive and pre-regulation update. A couple of notable changes on definitions are one on adverse drug reaction being a response to a medicinal product, which is noxious and unintended. Another one is on post-authorization studies, which are new, obviously, because there's a study relating to the authorized form of the product conducted with the aim of identifying, categorizing, or quantifying a safety hazard, confirming the safety profile, or measuring the effectiveness of risk management measures on the product. Also, you've got the risk management system being defined as a set of pharmacovigilance activities and interventions defined to identify, categorize, prevent, or minimize risks relating to a product, including the assessment of the effectiveness of those activities and interventions. The risk management plan being the description of the system. The PV system, defining by a system which is used by the license holder and the countries to fulfill the tasks and responsibilities designed to monitor the safety of the products and detect any changes against the risk-benefit profile. The Pharmacovigilance System Master File, which is a detailed description of the pharmacovigilance system used by the license holder in respect to one or more authorized products. Annex 2 has some templates in it for the direct healthcare professional communication format. It also has a cover page listed for the proposed formatting of the periodic safety update report. Annex 3 is a PV guidance document that was developed under previous legal frameworks, but is still valid within the new GVP system. And this particular website, which is EMA's website across Europe, is the best website to utilize to pull up all of these annexes, all these modules. You'll see the PV system described on this particular homepage, and this is where you can go to pull up all the individual modules in full text, all the annexes in full text, and again, download those and I'll print them off if needed. Annex 4 is basically the ICH guidelines for pharmacovigilance. Annex 5 is on abbreviations that are found in the individual modules themselves. And that kind of comprises the overall plan for what Europe had to really re-look at all the ways to update their new EU PV directive and regulation, and the way to go at this from a modular standpoint, kind of not necessarily introducing concepts around inspections or auditing or PSURs and other topics that were always there before, but in essence tweaking the spirit of how the reports are to be written from the licensee's perspective by updating and continually updating the safety profile of a product while it's on the market, with the ultimate goal of updating that risk-benefit profile as well as protecting patient health. So with that, those are going to be my formal comments for our webinar today. What I'm going to do is turn it back to Michael, who can introduce us into the Q&A session, should you have any specific questions on anything that I presented today. Michael?
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, like Bob just said, if you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, this would be your time. What you could do is, if you want to directly put forward a question for Bob, you can click on the raise hand option, which is a palm-like icon in your participants panel. That way you can go ahead and unmute your individual lines and you can directly put forward your questions to Bob. Or you can make use of the Q&A or the chat messenger. So if you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, please go ahead. Feel free to go ahead and put forward your questions today. Yes. Bob, I have a couple of questions here. Okay, the first question is, can you discuss the impact to contract manufacturers related to the reporting requirements?
Yes, be happy to. So yeah, contract manufacturers or third-party manufacturers, as they are known sometimes. Basically, what I would suggest here, and I assume the person asking is in the business of a third-party manufacturer, contract manufacturer. But regardless, I believe that those responsibilities are going to be defined in something such as a quality agreement. A quality agreement between the company being contracted for services as well as the company providing the service. So again, these quality agreements are intended to basically outline the responsibilities of both parties. So sometimes quality agreements are written such that TPMs are pulled into PV reporting mode just because of the breadth of activities that they're doing. They may be one of the first ones to be notified of an adverse reaction and the reporting around that. Or if the quality agreement's written such that responsibilities are all going to be placed upon the license holder in the EU, then of course all the responsibilities will kind of flow in that direction. So my answer is, of course, it depends, but I would suggest that if that's not already identified in the contract that you've got with your clients, then I would suggest that you put it in there one way or another to get that clarified, because this now has the potential to, like you said, expand to other suppliers if they're expected to be the ones first notified about adverse reactions.
Thank you, Bob. And Bob, with regards to the same question,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
With regards to the same question, I have another question which says, can the contract manufacturers expect to be a part of the PV inspections?
Again, it'll depend on whether the agreement involved them or not in the overall PV reporting scheme of things. So, for example, if the quality agreement said that the third-party manufacturer played a role in reporting adverse events and adverse reactions into the user vigilance module, then they obviously would be on the radar screen for inspections by the healthcare authorities for QP of PV activities. But if that quality agreement or agreement with their clients basically took them off the radar screen of any responsibility there, then I think that if you were contacted as a TPM to be part of an audit, you could simply speak to those quality agreements that is not within part of your remit or responsibilities which have been part of the contract with the clients that buy a product from you. So again, it all comes back to me, the scope of what you've agreed to with your client base and be able to utilize that, either putting you in the middle of an inspection or outside the scope of an inspection.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for that. ladies and gentlemen, if you have any further questions, we have a few more minutes. So if you want to put forward any questions, and also like I said earlier, would like to remind you all that if you do come up with questions at any time after today's session as well, you could feel free to get in touch with Bob directly. You have his information on the handouts, and also in case you want to get in touch with him, you can also send your questions over to us or the Global Compliance Panel team or directly to me, and I'll have those questions forwarded to Bob to get you your answers. And also would like to remind you all that the feedback form is open in the polling area, so please share your feedback on today's session. And we just have over 8 questions, and they're all multiple choice in nature, so it shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes to share your feedback on today's session. So we really appreciate your feedback before you log off today's session. Bob, I don't see any questions coming up. I'll just give it an extra minute to see if our attendees have any questions today. And also would like to remind you all that today's session is available in a recorded format. So if you feel that any of your friends or colleagues could benefit from today's session, you can have them log on to our website or give us a call as well. We have today's session available in a recorded format. Also, there are a lot of webinars from the past which are available in a recorded format. So there are a lot of topics which are very beneficial. So if you feel that any of your colleagues or anybody in your organization would benefit from these, you can at any time go through the website. We have a dedicated web page for Bob alone, so you can go through all the topics which are recorded, and we also have a topic coming up which would go live later in a month as well. So if you feel that this would be beneficial, you can at any time give us a call or log on to our website as well, or you have the link on the screen as well and on your handouts as well. Bob, I don't see any questions coming up from our attendees here, so we'll go ahead and conclude the session before we do any final remarks.
I guess I would just make a few comments to all of our attendees relative to the various modules that are coming out. So stay close to the Europa website that I gave you in the last couple of slides. That'll be the spot for which you can check on when the new modules will be published. Obviously, if your company regularly gets involved with any stakeholder feedback, they're asking that of several communities, one of those being the manufacturing license holder community. So feel free that obviously if you're in this product area that you can comment on what is being publicly put out there, especially if you're working and operating within the European landscape as well within your domain, to be able to do that and have a voice into how the modules and guidance documents are being created. So definitely keep an eye on the website, keep an eye on some of the dates, especially the effective dates as to when some of these new ones will be going into effect, because those will become then the requirements by law for your internal systems to comply and operate under those new changes. I wanted to thank everybody for attending today, and I'll turn it back to Michael.
Thank you so much, Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, just want to reiterate that if you have any questions whatsoever on today's session or any suggestions whatsoever that you'd like to make, you can at any time give us a call or log on to our website, or you can write in and send in your suggestions as well. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, please go ahead and give us your feedback on today's session. We just have 8 questions, and we really appreciate your feedback. This is only to enhance our webinars for the future. This again applies to Bob, Russell, and the Global Compliance Panel team as well. And ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all logging in today and participating in today's session. And on behalf of Mr. Robert Russell and the entire Global Compliance Panel team, I thank you all once again and hope the rest of the day is a lovely one. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.